over the last few classes, we've been talking a lot about 5-plane, 9-plane, and about voicing techniques. So the next several assignments have to do with that. But they also have to do with a very basic concept in music, which is the idea of voice leading. Okay? Now, one of the things that is really important when we're talking about real music, like real instruments, real performers, all this, is that when music is played properly, it should sound smooth and even and blah, blah, blah. But if you wrote it out the way that, you know, the scientific triad-y whatever says, things would sound kind of awkward and they would kind of bounce around and it would be kind of ucky. And so we need ways of kind of smoothing those things out. So before we dive into the assignment, the first thing we're going to look at is this concept of voice leading. Now, voice leading, I think, let's see, where is voice leading in here? There it is, 67. Okay, so as you can see on this little colorful graph here, voice leading is very, very simply the idea that we are trying to make the notes of one chord move as little as possible to the next chord. So in this example, where this first note is blue, you can see it went D, D, C. It didn't move very much, right? That's very easy to play, and it sounds really smooth. This note here, the green one, A, A, G, nice. F, F, E, cool. C, B, A, nice. Everything is moving a very small amount, and this will sound very normalized and lovely. So if I was to notate this progression really quickly, excuse me, so we would have that first chord was, oops, I'm on the wrong beat of the measure. Whoop. Okay, so then we would have a C, which we're going to put down an octave, F, A, D. So that was the D minor 7. The next chord was the G7, so that would be a B, F, A, and a D, because I put a ninth on it for fun. And then we would have an A, an E, a G, and a C. Okay? Now, to be clear, roots of chords are technically exempt from voice leading rules. However, if you get decent voice leading, all the better. Okay? So that's a D, oops, that one's going to be a G, and then this one would be a C. Like that. Okay? So you can see here, we have that same small distance. This note travels no more than a step. This one goes 3 steps, but it's 1 step per measure. And if, again, if we play it, it just sounds nice, right? Like it's just lovely. Okay? And that's the way music is typically written, and that's the way music is typically performed. Because guess what? From the performer's standpoint, that's really easy to play those chords on the piano, right? Because my fingers don't have to move very much. And that makes them very easy and close together, so that's a plus also. Now check out, just for fun, what would happen if I took away the voice leading. And so let's say I did this. And I'm just going to make stacked triads. Okay, so you'll hear the first one, and then you'll hear the second one. Hear that middle one? one kind of sticks out like a sore thumb? Because the last two, the first one and the last one, voice lead okay, right? Because they're pretty close together. But that middle one is just like, you went low, high, low, you know. That's not very smooth, right? So in an ideal universe, all voice leading really means is that we want each note of the chord to move as little as possible, okay? And by definition, each note should either stay the same or move no more than a step. So that would be a space to a line or a line to a space. Half step or whole step, fine. Once in a while, you're going to end up with like a jump of a third or something, because there's just some chords that don't voice lead well into other chords, and so you just deal with it. But if you do it right, you should be able to voice just about anything where every single note of the chord is around a step, okay? This is also why it's important when we're building voicings to establish how many notes we're going to use. And again, that's why I was telling you in the beginning, you should really think about filling all the planes, because if you went from a 4-note chord to a 3-note chord, guess what? The voice leading gets a little more complicated, because now 2 notes must become 1, and sometimes that can be complicated, okay? So, like I said, in an ideal universe, if we have 3 notes to start with, we're going to end with 3 notes, not with 1 note. That would just be hard, okay? And again, you can see this is all in your book. I mean, you can look at that. Nice, clean voice leading. Everything is moving as little as possible. But look at that. You know, everything jumps up way high. And that produces the thing we just heard in the audio example where it went low, high, low. Now again, it's art, not science. Nobody dies if your voice leading isn't good. But that's what makes songs kind of awkward, is when they're just not done well. Yeah. It's pretty straightforward. You can see here's another example with some more complex chords. The 5th of the chord becomes the 9th of this chord, becomes the flat 13 of this chord, which then has to move by 3rd. You can see that's a more complex one, but it's not too bad, right? B flat, G, G. That's okay. A flat, G, F, E flat. Oh, that's good. D flat, B, and B to D flat, right? That's actually a whole step, right? Because D flat and C sharp are the same note, so that's actually only a whole step, so that's not even a third, so that's not so bad, okay? And this is just an example of when the chords get a little more complex, sometimes the voice leading is a little harder, but it's not impossible. That is a great question, and it talks about it, I think, yeah. It talks about it in this chapter, but one of the things you'll notice is if we look at these voicings, because these are what I'll call perfect, right? Everything's like really close together and stuff. This voicing is 7, 3, 5, 9 playing, right? Because that's the 7th of the chord, E, dominant 7th, A, minor 7th, C sharp, that's the perfect 5th, F sharp, that's the octave, right? Everybody with me? So it's 7 playing, 3 playing, 5 playing, 9 playing. Check out the chord next to it. This is the 3rd, this is the 7th, this is the 9th, and this is the 5. They're literally opposites. It goes 7, 3 on the bottom, and then the next chord is 3, 7. Because if you were to do it the other way, the 7 of this chord is the A, and going E to A is a big jump. But the 3rd of this chord is a D, so going E to D, oh ho! So there's actually a cool, it's a happenstance thing, but it's pretty reliable. It is almost always true that if you have a functional chord progression, aka something that comes off of our graphs we've been talking about, it's almost always true that you're going to have voicing type 1, like 7, 3, 5, 9 or whatever, and then the next chord will be the opposite, 3, 7, 9, 5. And it'll go back and forth, because guess what? That's the 7 playing, that's the 3 playing, that's the 5 playing, that's the 9 playing. So it's like this one and this one are the same voicing, and this one's the opposite. Which is why this voicing over here doesn't work, because the 5th is right here, and then we put the 9 plane here. Had we actually gone 5 and then put the 9 plane on the bottom, it actually would have voice led. That's not a perfect voicing, but it would have worked, right? Had we flipped it on its head, it would have worked. And this is why we invert chords, is for this reason of voice leading. That's actually why we invert chords, is to make them easier to play and make them sound smoother. It's not because there's some sort of magic blah, blah, blah. No, it's practical reasons, okay? So again, the most important thing to note is we're just looking for the less motion we can get. It should seem obvious. If you had an A chord followed by a G chord, guess what? You just take all the notes in your voicing and just go down, right? Or if you went from a B flat to a C chord, you just grab all the notes and go up. Because the third of B flat is D, the third of C is E. Oh, that's easy. The fifth is, because they're a step apart. That's easy. But all the other chords that you could think of are probably going to be an inversion, meaning you're going to have, the first chord is going to have a 7 on the bottom, the next chord's going to have a 3rd on the bottom. Does that make sense? Now, to kind of more accurately speak to your question about how do you know when you need a 3rd, guess what? It's just the way it's going to be, because if you do your voicing right, you're just going to find that by happenstance, my 5 plane ended up on the top of this chord. Because it's a flat 13, the 5 plane demands that I put an E flat in that chord. This chord here, if I started from the bottom, this is the most logical thing. So the last plane is going to end up being the 9 plane. And because this is not a C minor 9, it's a C minor 7, that means there's an octave in that, which means I have to jump by a 3rd. Typically speaking, if you have simple chords, the voice leading is always easier. When you have more complex chords, that's where you're going to get stuff like this. It's also why some composers will take a C7 chord and turn it into a C9, because it improves their voice leading. Because instead of having to jump a 3rd, had that been a C minor 9, then I would have gone from E flat to D natural, which would be a half step. So I might think, oh, that improved my voice leading, I'll do that. But again, the reasoning behind that choice was not holistically artistic, it was sometimes just practical. It made my voice leading easier, so I went ahead and I did it.